And now a little later than advertised because of the overrun from our earlier live concert, it's time for Mixing It, presented by Mark Russell and Robert Sandall.
Hello, tonight's bill of fare includes fractured jazz from Pinski Zoo, film music to kill for from Bernard Herrmann, and for nearly half of the next 45 minutes we'll be roaming around the intensely personal world of the Canadian singer-songwriter Jane Sibery. We begin, though, with a quick trip to the tiny Pacific island of Tubuai, where the French ethnomusicologist Pascal Nabat-Meyer went to record the choral music of its Polynesian inhabitants. You may recall the fruits of Nabat-Meyer's first Polynesian field trip, the Tahitian choir album which he recorded on the island of Rapa Iti. The difference this time is that Tubuai has preserved its indigenous Mahoy culture comparatively free of Western musical influences, without, you might say, mixing it. So of course we thought we'd play some.
Tubuai Choir with Vahine Tiahara from the album Polynesian Odyssey, and the label that's on is Shanachi. Now, the previous track we heard from the Polynesian Choir featured some unusual vocal sliding. What I liked about this one was the balance between the solo and the ensemble singing. And the ensemble seemed to have a peculiar dense harmonic texture. I was trying to work out the tonal centre of it. It seemed to be around the sixth of the scale, quite unusual.
I enjoyed those. They've got a couple of outriding vocalists who lead the changes. It almost at times seems to be breaking into an African call and response, but then it goes back to the strict choral work.
Quite a nice raucous sound to it as well. Now from Tubuai to Nottingham, where free funk outfit Pinski Zoo have been based for around 13 years. They're original, spiky and exciting, and I just don't know why they haven't been more successful. Mind you, like a lot of jazz groups, they seem to be more popular in Europe. For this, their 8th album, they've put together a bunch of live performances, including 4 tracks recorded at a jazz festival in Austria. This is one of them, and it's called Fridge. Pinski Zoo in live performance there with a track called Fridge from the album De-Icer, and that's on the Slam label. Pinski Zoo, Jan Kopinski on sax, Steve Iliff keyboards, Carl Bingham bass, and Steve Harris drums. Robert, I was never really a fan of jazz funk, but I think they've taken it into uncharted territory. It's much more interesting.
It is, and I love the way that they managed to hold their dissonant and harmonic elements in a very interesting sort of relationship. It's that I love that kind of music where you get the sense that the thing is just about to fall apart, but it never quite does.
The thing that interests me is the sort of interweaving counterpoint. They've the bass player often doesn't play bass lines. He's playing sort of elasticy guitar noises which go with the sax, and the bass is actually done by the keyboards. Quite unusual.
The instruments are very well defined as well, aren't they? I mean, you can always, it's almost like a sort of five-part conversation.
Definitely a band to go and see live.
Now, responsive as ever to the signals of interest and approval you, the listeners, send back, we felt the time was right to feature Jane Sibery on the programme. She's released 4 albums over the past 10 years, the most recent of which, When I Was a Boy, created a small bulge in the Mixing It postbag last year, and led us to invite her into our studio when she paid a flying visit to Britain in the autumn. For the uninitiated, Jane Sibery is a Toronto-based singer whose interest in the spoken word and in multimedia experiments, along with her idiosyncratic sense of humour, have led to the inevitable comparisons with Laurie Anderson, which is okay up to a point, the point being that Sibery is more musicianly, less intellectually cool and politically correct, and much keener on the sheer joy of singing than Anderson, as you'll appreciate from this caper through a variety of styles, The Very Large Hat, a track from her 1985 album The Speckless Sky. Had you always wanted to be a singer?
No, the singing thing came as an aside, really, to sing what I wrote. And then slowly I have identified more with being a singer.
Did you start writing prose, poems?
Yeah, I wrote a lot of prose when I was young, and I improvised music always. And so when I finally put the prose and the music together, I was 17. And I still do a lot of writing that never comes to light as a song, musically and also prose-wise.
When you decided to bring the words and the music together, what sort of musical elements were you interested in?
I don't really know how to describe it, but you know, if you had a choice of 4 notes and could put them together in a string, certain ways of arranging them would make you feel sick and tired, and certain ways of arranging them would make you feel like you had roots in the earth or something, humming. And that was my little compass.
2 names that crop up a lot when people are trying to describe your music are Joni Mitchell and Laurie Anderson. Are these performers who you recognise as kindred
Joni
spirits?
Mitchell is definitely a huge influence, because she was one of the first voices that, the first people who I responded emotionally to, lyrically. And Laurie Anderson, I respect her, but I've never really fallen under her spell, so to speak. But I know the 2 names come up a lot.
You were saying earlier, Jane, that Miss Punta Bianca was written about something which actually happened. Do you usually find yourself writing about things that actually happened to you or people that you know?
Yeah, although I do change the names to protect the innocent or the guilty sometimes. But often they're metaphors. Yeah. But the chances of going to the Punta Blanca Hotel in Cuba are very great for Canadians, because you pay $500, go through the Fiesta travel agency, and you have a choice of 2 hotels. It's a real... So that's where we went, and in fact, we did consider going to the Punta Blanca contest. He to see if he could win Mr. Punta Blanca. It was sad, pathetic picture I painted, wasn't it?
I found it very funny, actually. Is humour
That's
something...
what I mean.
Do you like to be funny?
Yeah, I do. I actually realize there's been a real imbalance with how I'm perceived, because often people think I'm very serious and pretentious, aloof, removed, artsy. And yet the things that move me to write about are the everyday person and the everyday things, and it hurts my feelings very much to be pushed aside as something for people in the know, because I feel like I'm moved by the everyday and write for the... I just write about things that aren't written about every day, that's all. I could have been Miss Punta Blanca. I could have, but I didn't want to. I think I could have been a winner if I'd gone dancing after dinner. I could have rumbled by the poolside. I could have sambled with the tour guide. Instead I took a motorcycle ride with my friend Mike, this guy I really like. He rents the motorbikes, so I light me a cigar, my love, and tell me your name. I know your name. Let's pour me a drink now. Let's have a toast to who we really are, and I'll sing you a song right in your ear on this beautiful Cuban moonlit night. Oh, I need another light. I could have been Miss Punta Blanca. I could have, but I didn't want to. I could have, but I said no thank you. I said I didn't want to. Anyways, it was Ruby who won the contest, and 2 hours later she was passed out by the pool.
How would you, from the vantage point of now, describe your progress as a recording artist? I mean, you've made, I think, 5 studio albums, and there's been the compilation Best Of.
Right.
How do you see that progression yourself?
Circular, meandering, convoluted. Well, the compilation doesn't really count. That was an aside.
Right.
But fairly focused, I'd say. I feel like this record, although its path was very convoluted, as I say, and never what I expected.
We're talking about When I Was a Boy now?
When I was a boy.
Yeah.
I almost I had another record written, and I rejected it because it didn't feel like a big enough step. It felt like it was a sequel to the last record. So I'm saying that it's important to me that the next thing I do is a gathering from and a leap forward.
How do you actually write your songs, Jane? I know in some of the things I've read that you refer to your music in terms of fragments. How do you assemble your pieces?
I think of a lot of my songs as caught. Is that what you mean? Like a fragment? That it's just a caught in time as opposed to the beginning. And that's the way it should be. I like that. But An Angel Stepped Down is sort of different because when I write, I just put on a tape recorder and then I blow, improvise, and words come out. And like The Vigil was written in one pass with almost all the words, and the chords were all the same. But An Angel Stepped Down was actually from a tape that I make of all the special bits from like hours and hours of blowing, and then I put them on this tape, end to end, all these little favorite bits, and then I listen to it over and over again and weed out the ones that stop moving me after a while. But this little string of special things took on this song-like quality, and so what An Angel Stepped Down is all the special bits put across a groove.
Come on, baby, come on, give me. 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 Come on, give me. Come on, your love to me. Step down, touch lightly to the ground.
Is there something that you haven't said? That you haven't said?
Stared at her soul.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Come on, baby, come on, give me. Come on, baby, come on, give me. Come on, baby, come on, give me. Come on, baby, come on, give me.
Someone help me, someone help me, someone help me, someone help me.
I'm holding, come in, your love to us again. Stand us across the water.
This new album, I notice, has got a lot of religious allusions in the titles, at any rate. Can you elucidate that? Why are there so many titles which refer to angels, the Gospel According to Darkness, Calling All Angels?
No, I think they were just in the air for this record. You know, I find with every record there's certain common symbols are attractive at that time, certain symbols and certain colors. And this record had to be, and we worked and actually the lipstick is wrong, the color. That's the only thing I regret
Your
about
lipstick
this.
on the cover?
Yeah, they repainted, it was touched up. It was supposed to be MAC number 14. It's because I don't know, all these things are important to me. It's too burgundy. The color of this record is more on the orange side. It's too deep there. But anyway, this record had a certain tone to it, color-wise, sound-wise, which dictated which synth sounds I used in samples and everything.
Does this mean then that you sort of see your songs almost as pictures?
Yeah, in some cases I see them before I hear them. And An Angel Stepped Down, I did a video for that because I could see it. But if I can't see it, I can't do it.
So you image all your songs before you actually record them?
Yeah, that's before I write them, yeah.
You've worked with a number of people on this new album. Brian Eno produced a couple of tracks. Have you worked with him before?
No, never.
How did you come into contact with him, or he with you?
Well, Baby Lips Eno is
That's your name for him, is it?
yeah. That was one of the first things I noticed. That for someone who was highly intelligent, his jaw was very relaxed, and his lips were very soft, like a child's, which I think is a sign of balance. Anyway, he really loved Bound by the Beauty, my last record, and wrote Warner Brothers in the States. Imagine writing a letter, like busy as he is, he actually sits down. That to me is a sign of someone who's really centered. So he wrote Warner Brothers in the U.S. and said he loved the record and why hadn't it done better. And so when the idea of someone working with me came up, they put him forth as one possibility. And I think he took very perverted pleasure in being considered the person to bring me to accessibility.
He sings, doesn't he, on Temple? I think it's
No,
his...
he doesn't.
Doesn't
No.
he? No.
No. But he called David Ramsden, who sings on it, one of the great voices of our time.
Ah.
Which I think, in fact, is true.
Come on, 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 come on. Let me into the temple. Come on, 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 come on.
How was singing the duet with K.D. Lang?
Well, she arrived in the studio with her little dog Stinker, with a kerchief on her head, and Stinker, who barked at everyone. She looks like she can handle herself, but it was so funny to see this little dog totally in love with Katie in front of her barking. So Katie and Stinker arrived, and we were in booth at first, and then we couldn't really connect, so we came out on the floor and so we could see each other, and then we started singing, and then that singerly thing happens when you can make eye contact and actually feel the other person's presence. And then it was for me anyway very special.
Call all angels, call all angels, walk me through this one, don't leave me alone. Call all angels, call all angels, we're trying, we're hoping, but we're not sure how. On every day you gaze upon the sunset with such love, intensity. Why, it's almost as if you could only crack the code, then you finally understand what this all means. Ah, but if you could, do you think you would trade it all the pain and suffering? Ah, but then you'd miss the beauty of the light upon this earth, and then the sweetness of the leaving. Call all angels, call all angels, walk me through this one, don't leave me alone.
I noticed there have been quite a few, well, over here we noticed that there have been quite a lot of very characterful female vocalists who have emerged from Canada in the last few years. K.D. Lang is an obvious one, Mary Margaret O'Hara.
Right.
Margot,
Timmins.
yeah.
Holly Cole.
Do you is there anything in this? Do you feel some kind of that this is your time?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's the time for... I think it's a battle between darkness and light, between depression and love for life. And I think these are really difficult times, period, for everybody. And so I think the kind of music that will... And music has been a way to heal always, since the beginning of time. The music that will come to the fore on certain levels, I think, is music that's believable, that people can trust. And I think that's different as we all are. That's a common denominator.
You watch the slow train moving through the city late at night, adjusting back and forth against the darkness and street lights. I know that you're feeling bad, but I'm glad you did it. Easy to get caught up, but you know you can't always, you can't always, you can't always walk away. The life is a rebellion, rolling along. The life is a rebellion, keeps the feet upon the ground.
Jane Sibery talking there, and that track was The Life is the Red Wagon. That was from her third album, Bound by Beauty, on the Warner Brothers label.
And if you'd like a permanent memento of tonight's show, why not write in for a playlist containing catalogue details of all the music we've played? Send a stamped addressed envelope to Mixing It, Radio 3, 16 Langham Street, London, W1A1AA. And if you're already drowning in a sea of paper, look us up on page 642 of CFAX.
And that stays on CFAX until Friday. Now, when we made a Mixing It feature on film music a while back, we asked a number of film composers who had influenced them most, and the name that came up pretty much every time was Bernard Herrmann. His first Hollywood score was for Citizen Kane in 1940 with Orson Welles, made while Herrmann was still only 29. Now, this was the start of a long line of successful collaborations, most famously with Hitchcock, but later with Truffaut and Scorsese. His great strength was his ability to signpost the psychological undercurrents of characters and situations, while at the same time using unusual orchestrations. The 12 trombones of the original score for Hitchcock's Torn Curtain and the string orchestra in Psycho immediately spring to mind. To underline his importance as a film composer, Milan Records have just released a newly recorded selection conducted by his protégé, the film composer Elmer Bernstein. And it's an excellent guide to the man's work, even if in places it lacks the sense of urgency and edge found on some of the original soundtracks. So to end tonight, here's the suite from his very final score, written in 1975 for Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, and arranged by his then assistant Christopher Palmer. It's a concoction of themes and styles that brilliantly mirror the cloudy and disturbed mind of New York cabbie Travis Bickle.
Yes, I think you don't have to be told that Travis Bickle is a damaged Vietnam War vet to hear what's going on in his mind in this. It's a marvellous piece of work.
It starts with very martial music, which refers to his experience of Vietnam, and the sort of sensual jazz music refers to his infatuation with the character played by Sybil Shepherd. Scorsese asked for a score to be like New York Gothic, and that's what he got. He likes his recurring themes, did Herrmann. It ends with the 3-note theme he used in Psycho to denote madness and desolation. So from Taxi Driver, this is A Night Piece for Orchestra. Good night.
Good night.
That was A Night Piece by Bernard Herrmann, arranged from his score for the film Taxi Driver by Christopher Palmer. Mixing It was presented by Robert Sandel and Mark Russell, and produced by Philip Tagney.